Hello, stream. Welcome to my. Is this the right button? I hope it is. It is. Hello, welcome to the first ever ITT plant stream. And I apologize for the blinding brightness of this room right now. I have not closed the blinds because I don't want to. It is actually not very bright in here, despite what the camera thinks. So, in order to have just some natural light for my volume up, Jackson, my brother, you need to turn your volume up on your computer. My gain is all the way up on my mic. Let me see if I can change anything else. I think that it is as loud as it can possibly get, but you know, we will give it a shot. Blue Snowball, volume 100. Desktop audio is muted naturally because you know that's how we're not doing any computer stuff today. Yeah, it's as loud as it's gonna get. There's no way to make this louder right now. So I think you have to turn it up on your end. But anyway, what we will be doing today is finishing up our lovely plant tier list. First off, something got on it which made it like smear a little bit, but you know, it works. It still gets the job done. So we're going to be finishing this today, at least getting most of the way there. There's some plants that I have out in my main room that I will not be getting to because you know, I'm not the only one who lives here, and I do not need to be recording the. What the? Look at this. Hang on. Look. It's broken. My big Sharpie. It's broken. How did this happen? Do you? Like, there's a crack in it and a piece missing, and if I try and take the lid off, then I get the whole node. All right. Different Sharpie, I guess, but like I was saying, I don't feel like it's a great idea to just start bringing cameras into the place where other people live without running it by them. So we will be confined to the room today. As you can see, I brought some specimens in because they are to be discussed today, and also because they need some care, so I will be explaining how that works. And it actually looks like we do not have any other any other Sharpies. So we're going to be doing some surgery on this one to get it into working order. I really don't want to just like make a huge mess, so I'm being careful to try and pull it off, or rather pull the lid off without touching the ink cartridge. But oh, that was scary. Oh, it fell out. Get back in there. I'm honestly ashamed of this Sharpie. Like, how are you gonna have a product that does this? But anyway, let's get this into working order so that we can stop worrying about it for now and get to the reason I'm sure you're all here, which is, of course, the plants. So, thus far on the list, we have Golden Pothos in S tier as a reliable, easy to take care of, and very pretty plant. In A tier, we have a wooden fish that I got at Goodwill. At B tier, we have Aloe and Anthurium, aloe being a hardy succulent that is easy to take care of, but a little bit uninteresting. And Anthuriums being a tropical plant that is also easy to take care of, but tends to flower, which in my opinion makes it more stressful to deal with. In C tier, we have snake plants, and that is simply because they are about as interesting to own and take care of as fake plants, just because of how easy it all is. So unless you want something which requires basically no effort, it may not be for you. And then of course in T tier, at the very bottom, we have turf, because it is bad for the environment and takes up a lot of water and decreases biodiversity, among other problems. With that said though, you know, if you live somewhere where that type of grass grows naturally, there's nothing wrong with that. But it's from Southeast Asia, I think. So not the U.S. Despite some of it even being called Kentucky bluegrass, that is the name of the cultivated strain of it, I guess you could say, rather than the plant itself. So no, Kentucky bluegrass is not endemic to the United States as far as I'm aware. Correct me if I am wrong on that, because I'm not a professional grass guy. But I digress. We're moving on. We're going to get into the plant reviewing. So the first one I have here, it's a little sad, it's a little disappointing to see. You may have gotten a brief glimpse of it a moment ago, but here it is. Oh, that's awful. It's like so anticlimactic. This is what remains of what was once a very pretty alocasia, and to give you an idea of what this plant looked like in its prime, allow me to pull one up on the internet just to give you a frame of reference real quick. So this is, as it says there, a broadleaf perennial flowering plant, and they are tropical plants, of course, as most houseplants tend to be. And this in particular was the type that mine was. It had these nice white, almost variegated veins, and then the dark green leaves, and that sort of arrowhead shape. And it was very nice while it lasted, although it did not last. Oh, wrong screen. It did not last all that long. I got this plant in August, and it had 6 or 7 leaves, I think, and 3 stems, or like 3 main stems. And now it has, as you can see, 0 leaves and just 2 little tubers left. Oh, where is it? There's that smaller one there in the front. So, as indicated by the fact that it has those tubers, it is a plant that grows from like a bulb in vaguely the same way that like a tulip might, or even something like a yucca or a taro. But it is, in my experience, very difficult to actually take care of, as you can see. They are tropical plants. They need a lot of water and a lot of humidity, and because of those circumstances, there's a fine line between enough of whatever you need to give it and too much to the point where it develops root rot or fungal diseases on the leaves, both of which are extremely hard to treat, and once they're there, it kind of can't be, it's very difficult to accurately or effectively treat it. In this one's case, as you can see from the tuber and this attempt at new growth up here, it didn't get root rot, but it did end up getting a fungal disease on the leaves, which killed them all off. And yeah, it was a bummer. Like that, I think it was Wikipedia article said, they are perennial, which means that they do tend to die back in the winter and then come back in the summer. And this has died back, albeit it has not made the perennial comeback, the iconic perennial comeback yet. So I'm not exactly sure what the issue is. I predict it has something to do with light and humidity, because those are both things that are hard to get enough of where I live. But we'll see if we can get this on camera, because it's very hard to see, even with the naked eye. But if you look very carefully in there, there's a tiny bit of green. It's not going to want to focus on it, but there's a tiny bit of green right there, and that is new growth. So even though this looks completely dead, like a completely lost cause, it isn't. It is not a lost cause. This will, or at least should, grow back eventually. What are you saying, Disba? You are very quiet. What? What? How? Hang on. Okay. I'm sorry, Jackson. I was wrong. Is this better? Is this... No, that doesn't look better on the monitor. Is that better? Is that... That looks better now. Is it... I hope it is. Is that an improvement? Okay, we're better now. We're better. So, just to summarize what I said about this guy, This is a tropical plant. This one in particular died back for the summer and died back for the winter rather, and is struggling to come back, but as I pointed out, has that little new growth there, so the odds are good that it will eventually return. But to get to my judgment of it, because I've basically just been diagnosing that one in particular, I'm frustrated with alocasias. I wanted one for a long time, and I ended up getting that one as a gift. Thank you, Anna, for that. It's a very nice gift. But once it was here, it caused me much strife, much pain, much struggle, and for those reasons, until I can get it alive again and get it to like thrive like my other plants, I can't rate it very highly just because of how much of a pain in the ass it's been to get there. So I don't want to be too harsh on it, and this is kind of defeating the purpose of having this tier list with so many ranks because I'm already stacking them up. But this is gonna go in the C tier for now, with the potential to upgrade if it starts responding correctly to proper care, because I'd like to think I'm giving it at least as proper care as I can give it in, this climate. But that's that. Let me get a drink of water, and then we'll move on. Any questions so far, class? Okay, let's do this guy. This is a Dracaena. There are a lot of types of Dracaenas. I don't know the official names for any of them because there are so many that I don't really bother, and the care requirements are pretty similar across the board. But it is a Dracaena, that is the family name, and maybe even the species name, but I could be wrong about that. But anyway, they are another tropical plant. They got these nice big leaves. This one is in need of water, which is why it's kind of floppy. Usually they're a bit more perky than this. But we'll be watering it during the care section of the video later. And there isn't too much to say about these. Over time they grow up and start to have the bottom leaves die off. So you end up with these kind of palm tree looking plants where they have a woody stem which then goes up into the head, which would be like this. So in theory, over time this will continue growing up, and then it'll have a stick at the bottom that is bald or mostly bald, which is kind of fun. And they can flower. This one's not flowering, but they can under very optimal circumstances. But my thoughts on this plant: it's pretty easy to take care of, but the issue with it is that when there is something wrong, and this is the main thing, is water quality. When water quality is bad and you have one of these plants, you end up with it turning brown and dying off very rapidly because they're extremely sensitive to water quality. And you can see some evidence of that in some of the older leaves on this one, because when I moved to Denver, I didn't realize how bad the water was here. But there's some damage here. On this leaf, you can see these kind of brown stripes that are on it that were caused by that. This completely dead one back here is just dying off because it's one of the oldest leaves on the plant, so that's not the same cause. But you can see just from the older leaves that there have been times when this has received less than optimal water quality, and unfortunately, as a consequence, ended up with some damage. But other than that, these are easy to take care of. They don't require too much humidity to survive. They do better with more humidity, but if you end up putting it in a dry place, it's not the end of the world. But overall, I think Dracaenas are pretty good starter plants as long as you either live in a place with good water quality or have a water filter anyway because you drink filtered water yourself. But otherwise, if you don't have a way to get clean, like really clean water reliably, they are a pain in the butt to actually take care of just because you need to get filtered water for them or boil water. Oh, actually, boiling water wouldn't even help because a lot of the time the contaminants that cause the damage are minerals rather than biotic things. So boiling it actually wouldn't help. You'd actually need to filter it. But anyway, filter your water if you have a way to filter it. Easy plant, fun plant, pretty plant, good. If you don't, and this is the stipulation, if you don't have a way to get that water, then not as fun, because then you have to start spending money on filtered water or other stuff. So I'm going to put it in B tier just because it's got that one issue, but otherwise it would be an A. I just wrote B. It is Dracaena, not Bucena. Dracaena. There we go. I actually had 2 Dracaenas. Another is technically 3 because there's another plant that I've got called the common name for it is like a corn plant, and it's not a corn plant. It does not grow corn whatsoever. It is a Dracaena that is quite old and has a big, thick, woody stem, and then the leaves eventually start coming out of nodes on the sides. And I'll show you here. I can pull up a picture of it, but they are fun little guys, and it is, to my understanding, a type of Dracaena, despite nope, wrong ones, a houseplant. There we are. See how you have these leaves that kind of come out of the nodes here? You can see the similarity between that and this, where, you know, they have the striped leaves and the woody stem. But I actually do have a corn plant as well as one other small Dracaena. So, you know, even though I'm rating it fairly low, they are super affordable. They're at, like, you know, hardware stores because that's the kind of stuff that they sell there. So I definitely would not advise against getting this, especially if you think it is a nice looking one. So I'm going to put him back so I don't knock him over later and move on to something a little different because I don't want to say, oh, this is a tropical plant 6 times in a row. So I say that, but the vast majority of these plants are tropical, so it's very hard not to do that. Here, we'll do these guys because these I actually like a lot. So this is shredded Parmesan cheese. As you can tell, it's been dry aged to the point where it has turned black. And of course, this is a lie. This is actually dragon fruit. And these little guys I grew from a seed that I got out of an actual dragon fruit. And to those of you who don't know, dragon fruit grows on cacti, not on like fruit trees like a lot of other fruits do. So you can see them there. They're not actually sharp despite looking like it. Don't want to touch them too hard just because they have very shallow roots. But they're not sharp, they're just a little bit fuzzy. And they were surprisingly easy to germinate. I put them on a wet sponge, covered it with a damp towel, and I left it for a couple days in some bright indirect light. And then they sprouted. And after that, I went ahead and planted them all into this little cup. There were a lot more at first, but I basically picked the best specimens to continue growing and focused on those. But you can see that there is one more in here that hasn't grown nearly as fast. I'm trying not to like dump any plant out, but you can see it right on the lip there, some green. That is one of the ones that hasn't developed a cactus yet. It's just the seedling. But as cacti, they have very little requirement in terms of water and fertilizer. What you do want to get them plenty of, however, is light and time. Time is really the big determining factor here because these are almost a full year old now. In August or September, they'll be a full year old, and as you can see, they are tiny. I'm not sure if you can really tell the scale. I'll try and put my finger in for reference. These are less than an inch tall, maybe even less than a centimeter, but that is almost a full year of growth, and it does not speed up. It is that slow for, you know, decades until it's large enough to actually produce fruit. And so if you're trying to grow dragon fruit in order to actually enjoy the fruit itself, I hope that you're still in the mood for it in 2035 because that's probably the earliest that you'll be able to do it. With these circumstances, I'm sure if you were growing them in a more natural habitat to them where they're endemic, they would probably thrive a little bit more, but that's okay. I think they're still fun to grow, and I'm going to pull something up again to show you what they look like when they're big. Dragon fruit cactus, because these guys do some funny things. that picture's sideways, but here's a good one. They grow in these like kind of zigzaggy shapes, and they're like nodular, I guess you could call it. You can see here there's like this little node between this stripe and this stripe, and it's fun. It's a very unique growth pattern that I don't think a lot of plants tend to have, and so if you're patient enough, you can end up with something really cool looking. Here's more seedlings for a better look at those if you want them. I mean, you can see it. You know what this looks like. It's a seedling. But anyway, yeah, that's dragon fruit. Oh, yeah, I guess it kind of does turn into a tree, but it's not actually a tree. It just looks like one in that picture. But anyway, I digress. I think dragon fruit are fun. They are surprisingly easy to start from seed, albeit extremely slow to grow. And it's not that big of a deal because they're low maintenance in the time that it takes for them to develop. So, with all that said, I will be putting it in the A tier along with the wooden fish because it's fun. It's unique. It's very, very nice. So, dragon fruit, solidly in the A tier. Might even upgrade it to S if it grew a little faster, but it don't, so we won't be doing that. Next up, and this is going to be a kind of weirder one because there are so many different types, and this is almost an entirely different ball game than like normal plant care. Succulents. These guys, there are thousands. There are endless varieties of succulents in this format and others. And cacti are succulents. Aloe are succulents. These things are succulents. I got a big flapjack succulent back there that we will be seeing in a little bit. You may even be able to see it. My screen's broken, but it's like that one with the up on the floor. But succulents, generally speaking, are desert plants that require infrequent but heavy watering and extremely well-draining soil, because the way that they work, the reason that these leaves are so engorged and you can kind of see that this isn't just a leaf, it's got like storage inside it, is because that's how they survive in deserts. Because generally the deserts where they grow, a lot of succulents come from Madagascar, for example, are places where it's dry most of the year, but when it rains, it really rains, and it rains onto this really porous, sandy soil and then drains away quickly. So they try and take advantage of that by sucking up all the water when it rains and storing it in these big leaf pads. So because of that, that's how you should try and imitate that circumstance when watering them, and you should be aware of that when taking care of them, because it means that they're very susceptible to root and crown rot, because they don't like standing water, and standing water is where bacteria tend to develop. And since in their natural habitat they don't have to deal with that standing water and that bacteria often, they don't have a very good, it's not an immune system, but it doesn't have a good system to repel those diseases, and thus they are very easy to become infected with those things. They can also get mealybugs and powdery mildew, so be careful of that as well. But with that said, succulents are very hardy, and they can bounce back a lot from many of the afflictions that they can run into. So they are good for people who want to learn and not have to buy a new plant every time they learn, and that's not the case all the time, because you can kill them. I've killed them before. I know a lot of people who have killed them, but if you give them proper care, even after they've been infected with something, as long as it's not some sort of rot disease, the odds are good that you'll be able to, fix them to a degree. They might be ugly, but at least you'll learn. And yeah, they're very unique, and I think that's why a lot of people are drawn to them, other than their supposed ease of care. I even forgot to mention that people advertise them as if they're really easy to care for and you don't need to do anything to them, which is just not true. If you want to have nice succulents, you do need to give them proper care, including fertilizer and adjusting where they are so that they don't grow like little creatures. I have some that grew like little creatures because I didn't do that, and So even though they're alive, they're really ugly. For example, this one actually, the green one here, that used to be the crown of a larger succulent, which was just like that big heavy crown on a really skinny stick with no pads, because I put it in an area with not enough light, so it grew straight up in an attempt to find the light and get what it needed, and then it all died off. But then I replanted it by cutting off the head. The thing about them is that they can grow leaves from their, or not leaves, roots from their stalks, not just from like the bottom. You can't see it very well, but it's got some roots in there that are just kind of feeling around to see if there's any moisture to suckle on. And it's doing that in the soil too, so it's developing a whole new root system. And I'm going to try and give that one more consistent bright light so that it doesn't end up getting as leggy. That's what it's called when they try and, you know, go find the light by going upward or outward. In some cases it can be down, it's just away from the main body of the plant. But anyway, I like them. I know some people prefer to avoid them just because, like I said, they are kind of a whole different ball game than most plants. They're hands-off in some ways and much more hands-on in others, and for that, you know, it appeals to a very specific kind of person. For me, I think they're cool, and I think that the ones that I have are very nice. They're some of my favorite plants aesthetically, but I don't really, you know, go to stores thinking, oh, I'm gonna get some succulents today, because for one thing, they are generally pretty expensive, especially for their size, just because they're I actually don't know why that's the case now that I'm thinking about it, but they're expensive for their size, and the way that you interact with them is just a lot different than some of the more tropical plants. So it's not super my speed, but having a couple around is always nice because it's a change of pace to take care of succulents versus, you know, tropical plants or deciduous, you know, like temperate plants. So I like them. I'm going to go ahead and put just like succulents in general in the B tier, I think, because I get why people like them, but they're not really for me in a lot of cases. So nothing bad to say, just not my thing, if that makes any sense. But that's that on the succulents. You know, I could go into more detail and research what the hell all these are, because this is a different species from this, and this, that is. And then both of those are different from probably all the other succulents I have, simply because succulents are so versatile in nature, I guess you could say. There's just so many different types, and they all have different names and all that. Just like any other type of plant, it's just that I've never really learned succulents in particular. But anyway, let's grab this real quick. We'll go over this part quick because it's not super relevant to what we're doing now. This is mac and cheese. Well, it's a mac and cheese container containing basil seedlings. And this is because I don't want to buy basil from the grocery store every single time I want it for a recipe, because they sell it in amounts that are neither enough, or they're either not enough or too much. And if you have your own basil plants, then you can trim them and, you know, get as much basil as you would like for basically free, compared to the price to get that much from the grocery store. But I wouldn't really rate this on a houseplant rating scale, just because it's so different. It's producing food for you instead, so it's a much more technical process and doesn't really have much to do with aesthetics, although it can be really pretty, especially this kind, because it's I think a sweet Thai basil, which has these big wrinkly leaves that are fun to look at, and like, you know, they're really interesting. But I digress. I just wanted to show this off because these seedlings sprouted up today after being planted a couple days ago, and I thought it was really cool. We'll be tracking these over the next couple of streams just to see how they develop, because it's just very serendipitous that they've started growing right when I'm doing plant streams. So that won't be going on the tier list, but I thought it was cool nonetheless. So let's move on to something that will be going on the tier list, which is this big boy. This is a peace lily, and this is another one of those plants that's like iconic to houseplants, even to people who aren't familiar with it. They are a tropical plant that grows these guys. They're just, pretty white flowers, look kind of like lilies. I don't think it's a true lily. I could be wrong about that. But they drink a lot of water. They are super easy to take care of because when they need water, they droop over and it's super obvious, and then you can water them and it all comes back without any permanent damage. They grow these flowers with basically no help, which is nice. I know I complained with the Anthurium that it's a pain in the ass to get it to flower again, and it's a source of stress if you're not into that sort of thing. But with these, the flowers just kind of come and go on their own, and as long as you don't, try and force it, then there's not too much to worry about with it. So spray them, humidify, give them, a little bit of fertilizer now and then. Flowering fertilizer is good, so like a 3-5-4. That's usually for produce, but I use it for flowering plants because I tend to see success with it. But yeah, there really isn't much to say about this one that hasn't already been said about other similar plants. It's easy to take care of, it's pretty, it grows fast. This is probably about double the size it was when I got it, which was about 2 years ago. I've repotted it once or twice since then, and yeah, I got nothing bad to say about peace lilies. I guess occasionally they die back a little bit with no real explanation, but that's just kind of what houseplants do in the winter, so I don't know if I can fault the peace lily in particular for that. There are other varieties of peace lily that don't just have these dark green leaves like this. They have variegated leaves, and to those of you not versed in that nomenclature, variegation is when leaves have like colors on them. I'll grab an example real quick. Here. So a non-variegated rubber plant would just be dark green all around, this dark green color. This, however, is a variegated rubber plant and therefore has variegation, which is like the lighter colors and the white you see. And when it's really young, even this kind of pinkish color, that's more of a pigmentation rather than a variegation, however. But anyway, that's what variegation is. There are variegated peace lilies that are really, really pretty. If I ever get one, I will definitely be showing the stream because I think it would be super cool. And with that said, yes, I would get more peace lilies despite already owning 3. And for that reason, on its own, I think it's safe to say that that goes into the S tier, peace lily. Because I feel like ultimately houseplants are meant to be enjoyed by you and your guests and anyone else who happens to see them, and they should be enjoyable to take care of. And because they are easy to take care of, visually attractive, and accessible, they're not super expensive, I think they're a very solid plant, so they're going in S. And I'm sure, like, if there's going to be, like, some plant snob who ends up seeing this video or this stream, being like, he's just putting the easy plants in the high tiers because he doesn't know what he's doing. And yeah, that may be the case, but it's my list. So, who cares? But, with that said, we will be getting to some plants that aren't particularly easy to take care of or aren't as easy to take care of that I will be rating highly because that's not the only thing that I, pass judgment on. But, anyway, moving on, we did the peace lily. Since we've got it here, let's do the variegated rubber tree. It is a rubber tree, a houseplant rubber tree, which I think is different from the ones that actually produce latex. But this one's a really little guy. Anna has a much bigger one, and they tend to be very easy in my experience. I know some people struggle with them, but just water them when the soil's dry and spray them occasionally. Keep their leaves clean so that they don't get pests. And if they do get pests, just use clove oil or neem oil. Yeah, there's not much to say about this one. I don't have a strong opinion on it either way. But I think it's fun. I think it's pretty. So, I don't know. Fuck it. C tier. C tier for the rubber tree because that seems mean. I'm just not putting much thought into this one and I'm rating it so low for no reason. No, we'll go B. There's going to be a lot of plants in B tier now that I'm looking at this, but who cares? Variegated rubber tree. Alright. Have we done all the ones on the bed? No. Last one on the bed. This big boy. Now, you may be thinking, Jackson, salad, my boy, that's a pine tree. And you would be right, this is a pine tree, but this is not the sort of pine tree that you would see in Colorado or Montana or anywhere else that pine trees typically grow. This is called a Norfolk Island pine, and it grows on tropical islands, which is quite bizarre for this type of plant, simply because evergreens tend to grow in colder climates. But no, this is a island pine which needs lots of humidity and lots of water, and I tend to care for mine the same way that I care for the peace lilies, simply because their care requirements are so similar. It doesn't flower, or at least mine hasn't, and I've never seen one that does, at least in a houseplant setting, but they do tend to grow pretty reliably. You can see, I don't know if you can see it, but up here, these fronds are a little bit greener, lighter green, than the ones like down here, and that's because they've developed new growth on the ends of them, which is, I can't really communicate this through any way other than explanation, but they're more delicate. You can touch them without it being as spiny. Down here it kind of feels almost like a cactus, because these spines become very stiff and sharp as they age, but the ones up here are very soft and gentle. You can run your hand through it and it feels more like a grain, like wheat almost. But yeah, I think it's a fun plant, not for any care reasons or even because it's particularly pretty, because I think it's neat, but you know, from an aesthetic standpoint, a little bit mid, depending on what kind of taste you have. But I like it because of its story. Like, people like to hear strange and bizarre stories behind plants, and you know, a Norfolk pine is one that they definitely won't be expecting, especially if they're not well versed in plants, because like I said before, people generally associate pine trees with colder climates and thus, you know, less watering and stuff. But this guy, he's a soggy bottom boy. He always wants to have you know, damp soil and humidity and all that, which is kind of interesting, and I like telling that story to people. So just for the, you know, intrigue that one inspires, we'll go with an A tier for him. A tier for the Norfolk Island pine. Norfolk. How do you spell that? Isn't it's Norfolk pine? The full name is Norfolk Island pine, but we'll know what we're talking about when we go back through at the end. That's all ones that I wanted to do from outside my room for now, because there's more, but I didn't want to bring them all in all at once. So let's do this. Get to see my shame, my ugly bastard. This poor specimen, I can't show all of it at once. This poor specimen is an orchid. I don't know what type of orchid. I got it for like clearance price at King Soopers just because I didn't want it to be left alone and to die. So I tried to save it and had moderate success. It has actually bloomed twice since I got it, and there's even new growth coming, even despite how sad it looks down here. But yeah, orchids are notorious for being finicky and needy and weird, because they're generally a parasitic plant where in their natural habitat they'll just grow on the bark or in like the divergence of two branches of a parent tree, where, you know, like moss and debris just kind of collects without forming full soil. And that's why orchids have such a weird bark that they need to grow in. Like, this is super, super coarse, way too coarse for most plants to grow in. But they need extremely well-draining soil that doesn't retain any actual water and just kind of has that residual moisture, because otherwise their roots, which are really big and fleshy, will tend to rot. And I'd love to show you a good example of that. But this one, as far as I can tell, only has like one living root, which it kind of explains why it's so ugly. And even that root doesn't look that pretty. It's brown instead of green, and usually healthy orchid roots are kind of bright green or white. But regardless, they're an interesting challenge. I'll say that much. I kind of want to get more orchids just because they are so interesting and they work so differently than other plants in a way that's more appealing to me than succulents, because it's a lot more hands-on. But the drawback is they are extremely expensive, especially rare varieties. Like, you know, you can get a $20 one at the grocery store and it's going to be white or yellow or pink or purple. But they're all going to be the same, like, species. I believe there's a lot of species of orchids, and some of them are really weird and rare. And so if you want to, like, develop a large orchid family, like a collection, it's going to be very expensive. Oh, there it is. It says $20 here. I got it for, like, $9 because it was on clearance. But, yeah, there's much more expensive ones. Like, if you even regular orchids, if you get them from a reputable source like a plant store, are gonna be like $40 to $60, and then any special varieties could easily start getting into triple digit, or, you know, if you're going really crazy, quadruple digit prices. So they're not exactly a poor man's houseplant, at least not the fancier ones. But with that said, if you like doing hands-on plant care and looking for like a challenge that is a lot different than other houseplants, I would recommend orchids just because they are so unique and interesting. Like, what other plant has a little bottom of leaves here and then just sticks that stick straight up like that and then make flowers? I think it's super neat and something worth, you know, paying attention to if you're looking for something weird. So, to the person that I'm sure is out there thinking, oh, he only gives the easy plants high ratings, I will be giving the orchids, and I'm just going to put them in as a group because I'm not well educated enough to rank them individually, nor do I have more examples to show you. Orchids will be A tier. Not remarkable. I could absolutely see myself upgrading them to S or even double S over time as I, you know, learn more about them and kind of build up my collection to understand the way they work and the cool stuff about them better. But for now, we'll go with the solid A tier just because I need more information before I come to a more outlandish conclusion. Water break. I talk more in these streams than I talk in the rest of my life combined. Like, I've talked more in this stream to no one, or rather to, you know, people in a theoretical sense or a parasocial sense, than I talked to anyone else throughout the entire day, despite working an entire shift at my job. Which is a little strange, but whatever. Who's next? I'm trying to, like, keep it varied, but we have mostly tropical plants left, so I guess we'll just do tropical plants. This guy. Oh, careful, fish. Hello, big boy. So, this is the first specimen of a certain family of plants that I am a big fan of, and I say that, but as I'm thinking about it, this is actually not from that family, so we will get there still. But this is called a Rhaphidophora tetrasperma, and the common name for it among houseplant keepers is a mini monstera. And to explain that name, look at these leaves. They have these big they're called fenestrations. It's where there's holes in leaves, and the evolutionary purpose of that is generally to allow like heavy rain or hail to pass through them without causing damage and allowing the leaf to get bigger. It can also help with strong wind, because these plants are native to places where there's hurricanes, and they don't want their leaves getting torn up every time there's a hurricane. So they get the fenestrations, and then it blows around, and it's not a problem because the air is just passing through and not getting caught on the big fans that are other leaves. But it's interesting. So I mentioned it. It's a Rhaphidophora tetrasperma, meaning that it's not a true monstera. Monstera is another family of plants. So monsteras aren't the only ones that develop fenestrations like this, but these look similar enough to those that they've kind of developed this misnomer. But I like the name, so that's still what I call it. And they're really fun to take care of. They grow in these really funky ways, along vines that kind of twist and turn in really interesting ways. I'll see if I can show you a little better. You can see it in there a little bit. This one's been pinned up in such a way that it grows upward, because they tend to like to climb better than to trail. And they just kind of twist and turn and do all these weirdo things that I think are really cool. It makes them look really feral and jungly, which I love. Like, that's my favorite kind of like aesthetic vibe for the houseplants. But yeah, in terms of care, water it, spray it, but not too much. And the thing you want to be careful with these about is overwatering. In my experience, they tend to get not root rot, but rather just like when they get overwatered, they kind of kill off some of their leaves at the bottom. For whatever reason, they turn yellow and then eventually fall off. So I think it's better to underwater them a little bit rather than overwater them, because you can always give it more. And I think, at least in my experience, they are more forgiving when you give them not enough water than when you give them too much. So be careful about that. But yeah, I really don't have much to say in terms of negatives about this plant. It's so cool. Look at it. It's feral. It's got weirdo leaves. It's got weirdo vines. It grows like crazy. Like, there's new growth at the tip of this. There's more new growth over here. It's just all over. And there's really not that much that I have to do hands-on to keep this going. Just keep pests off of it and water it just like any other plant. And it becomes a freak. It becomes a little bastard freak. And for that reason, I love it. There's not many plants that surpass the mini monstera, in my opinion. Let me get this back in its place because it's quite unwieldy, and then we'll rate it. Alright, cool. Now, you may be starting to see why there's an M tier on this list. It's because of monsteras. There are many types of monsteras, and while my collection of them is not extensive, well, I mean, they're actually the biggest individual portion of it that I have, because I have two Deliciosa, two Tetrasperma, and an Addisoni. Those other two that I mentioned that aren't the Tetrasperma we'll be getting to, but I love them. They are so cool. They have cool leaves, they grow fast, they're easy. We're going to keep going. Okay. Mini Monstera. M tier, absolutely. I think the double S tier is pointless, because anything that, like, there's not really much between S tier and Monstera. Like, I don't think there's anything that specific that I'm gonna go to, so we may end up with an empty double S tier. But continuing on the same track of plants that I really, really, really like, we'll do another Monstera. Why not? So this is a different type of Monstera, so it's going to look different. See if I can even get this in frame without causing problems. So this is a Monstera deliciosa. This is another one of those like iconic-ish houseplants that a lot of people recognize but don't know that much about. It's got the fenestrated leaves. This one is fairly young, which is why the fenestrations are kind of small on many of them. But I'm gonna skip over the care requirements in these next couple plants just because they don't really matter in what I'm praising. But ooh, I almost dropped it. They grow in like a kind of a bushy structure when they're younger, and as they age, they kind of turn into vines, and they can climb. Can't really trail, like they'll fall out of the pot and end up on the floor if you're not careful. But you know, it's not a true trailing plant, so don't try and let it trail. I'd say definitely trellis it once it starts, you know, bending to its own weight. This one's going to need a trellis by the time I repot it next. But I don't know how old it was when I got it, but I've had it for like a year and a half or 2 years, repotted it twice. And something fun about these is these big aerial roots. You see that thing that's like dangling down? There's another one over here. Can you see it? Ignore the yellow leaf. They just do that. There's another aerial root over there. And what those are these little feelers that the plant will send out to try and determine where there's water nearby. And, you know, if there is water nearby, those will find it and then the plant will grow in that direction, or even just moisture. And they also provide stability to the plant when they're climbing trellises or trees or stuff, and allow them to grow taller. So I think those are really fun. Some people snip them off just because they don't like the wild look it gives, but like I mentioned, I love that. So I keep them on. I let them go hog wild, as they say, and yeah, I have nothing bad to say about Monstera deliciosa. It's a super like basic choice, but it's in the running for being one of my favorite houseplants, if not being number one. And yeah, it's an easy M tier. This one and my other one. I'll show you my other one when we go through and take care of them all after the rating. But anyway, back to you. Cool. Here, we're gonna do this next one. This one's kind of trellised up, so I can't actually like pick it up and bring it to the camera. So I'm going to be switching to the other camera that I have set up, which is actually a phone, believe it or not. Let's see if this works. I hope it does. It does. Very cool. Okay. So we're gonna go. You don't need to see me. Apologies if the audio on this part isn't as good. I don't know quite how this is gonna work. I set it up last night and haven't tested it yet. But we got this one over here, and he's a little stringy, and I'll explain why. So this is called a Monstera addisoni, and this is a true Monstera that kind of grows in kind of a similar way to like a pothos or a philodendron would, but it's got the common name is a Swiss cheese plant because it's got these little holes that make it look a little bit like Swiss cheese, which is fun, which is nice, which is a good time. And they also like to grow upward because I don't actually know why, but they like to grow upward. They don't like too much water because they have the same problem as the mini Monsteras, where they'll tend to get kind of overwatered and yellow. They're a little bit prone to pests, but not too bad. And they don't always stay this small. Mine is kind of a bad example because I didn't treat it very well for a while when I got it because I didn't know how to take care of it properly. But it's bouncing back now. There was a time, as you can see here, when all of the new leaves failed, so the vine kept getting longer, but it didn't get any new leaves. But now, we got some new ones. And they're not the prettiest leaves. Those are very small, even compared to these, which are also small by this plant standards. This one is more than a year old, and it really should be larger, but it is not because I did not care for it properly. But it's on its way back, and as a Monstera, I'd like to put it in the M tier because that makes sense. You know, you want the M tier plants to be Monsteras just because that makes logical sense with what I'm calling it. But I don't think I'm going to because it's it's kind of a pain in the ass. I've had to be very specific about watering and fertilizing and giving it like the right growing conditions, and even with all of that, it's one of my most high maintenance plants. It's still leggy and a little bit, the leaves it has are pretty, but just the organization of it and the amount of support that it needs to even be growing at all is kind of an eyesore. Like, look, I have so much growing here, and something that sticks out is this big trellis for this tiny ass plant, which I'm not a big fan of. So despite being one of the Monsteras, it will not be going in the M tier today, unfortunately. With that said, gotta give it props. It's got great relatives, he's got a lovely family. He's not great himself, but he's got a lovely family, and for that reason, A or S tier? I can't decide. Should I do A or S tier? Let's be nice. Let's put him in S. No, I complained way too much about this to put it in S. It's going in A. Alright. Swiss cheese plant. Cool. We'll do a lightning round with the next one because there isn't much to say. Because it's grass. It's grass, everybody. It's some kind of grass. I bought this from a Home Depot, and it said it was a bonsai, and I was like, that sounds wrong, but I'm going to buy it anyway to see what it turns into. And this is clearly not a bonsai. To those unaware, bonsai trees are not actually a type of tree. It is a technique of growing which makes them like miniature. Mine has a dinosaur in it. I put it there. This is not a bonsai tree by any means, despite what it was labeled at the grocery store. Now that I'm looking at it, I'm realizing I don't remember what it is, if I'm being honest with you. But I just water it occasionally and it keeps growing. It has like these nodes at the bottom. They're some kind of tuber, I think. And I've seen bigger ones where it's just like one individual unit of this. This is a bunch of those little tubers, but it's like one tuber that's a lot bigger. I feel like it's called like it's not a baobab tree. That's a certain type of tree. It's something. I like it. I think it's funny. There's not that much to say about it. It's grass. It's just grass. It's funny, but unremarkable. Not a bonsai tree at all. So false advertising, that's taken away from it. It doesn't do anything special. It just grows the same things at the same length, and then they die off, and then more come. So nothing super inspiring there. It does not inspire much in terms of care or anything. So pretty mid. The one thing it has going for it is that it's funny. So I'm just gonna put it in the D tier, and I'll call it a fake bonsai because it's clearly not a bonsai. If anyone has any advice on making this plant more familiar or more interesting, let me know, because I don't know what it is, and I don't really care for it without the knowledge. So, I mean, I care for it enough to keep it alive, of course, because that's my thing, but, it's grass to me. Alright, for the sake of my own desire not to walk back and forth a million times and, carry a bunch of heavy pots, I'm going to finish the rest of this with the plant cam. See if we can get that going. Lovely. Okay. So we're going to go through the rest on the plant cam real quick, because there's only a few left. But next up, we have this guy. This is that flapjack succulent that I was talking about before. And it was actually one of my first ever plants. I bought it when it was very small. I think they called it I think they called it a flapjack, and they were selling it at Home Depot because I was planting a planter box in front of my house back when I lived with my family for Mother's Day, and I had never done gardening before. I just thought, hey, my mom might like this. It'll be pretty. We'll see how it goes. And this was one of the plants I bought. When I got it, it was probably only about the size of this crown here, maybe a little bit bigger than that. But it was pale green and had none of this pretty red coloring on it that it has now. But threw it in the ground. It grew for a summer. At the end of the summer, I dug it up and put it in this pot because I didn't want it to die in the frost because I had grown attached to it, of course. And now it just runs rampant in this little pot here because it has all these babies, and these were not with it when it was growing in the ground. You got more here. You got another major head over here. And as a succulent, it's easy. You just water it whenever it's totally dry and the leaves start getting a little squishy. But something that I found with it, you'd think as a full sun paddle plant, it would be in love with being in direct sunlight and being outside during the hot summer in Colorado. But every time I put it outside, this fool sunburns. It sunburns like a human sunburns, where the top layer of it will turn crispy and burnt and then peel off. And I generally try and take care of it right when that happens and peel off the layer. But I'm gonna see if I can find any. This is also sunburn. It's just a little bit different of it. Here, this is a good example. Once that calluses off and dries up, I'll be able to peel off that dry looking spot there, and underneath will just be more flesh. And I don't know why it does this. Every source that I've looked up claims that paddle plants are full sun plants and therefore should be in direct sunlight as much as possible. But this one does not like it. It burns, it turns brown in some places, and occasionally it will get this really pretty red color, as you can see. But more often than not, you get that. And so I don't want to kill it, so I just leave it inside where it gets enough light, but I guess it gets enough. It's very confusing to me. I don't understand this plant very well. That's a good way to put it. But with that said, I also think that it's very pretty, and I like it a lot for that reason. So, as we return, take a seat real quick and head over here. We'll go ahead and put that in the C tier. Not for that plant in particular, because I love that plant. That is one of my favorites, simply because there's probably some desync between me speaking because of the way this camera works. Anyway, that plant in particular I have a very strong emotional connection to, simply because it was one of my first plants ever. But that plant, in a vacuum, without the sentimental connection, is frustrating to me, and I'm putting it in C tier for that reason. Flapjack. Rest in peace to that plant's brothers, by the way. It had 2 pencil cactus companions and a short-leafed aloe companion, and the short-leaf aloe is long gone. It got root rot when I transferred it to a pot, and it never recovered, and now it is gone forever. But the pencil cacti, I don't know what happened to them, but they ended up dying off a bit, and ultimately got consolidated into one plant, which is now out on my patio. But we're not looking at him right now. Next up, I'm not going to get too in the weeds with this guy because he's hard to get to because he's blocking the way and I don't have enough space in this room. But we'll lift some of the golden pothos out of the way. We talked about them last time. Very lovely plants, very easy, very pretty, big leaf. Oh, by the way, this is another sample of golden pothos. The leaves are smaller, it's less variegated. Same plant, different circumstances. Just thought that'd be interesting. But this is a Philodendron Brazil, who is actually situated inside Brazil Man as his pot, which I thought was, that's actually why I ended up getting this plant, so I could give Brazil Man hair. But it is a vining plant. It essentially the same care requirements as a pothos. except it has these fun heart-shaped leaves with the yellow stripes in them. And you can come up here, you can see how it's kind of gnarly the way that these vines form. They can twist and turn in really interesting ways, which doesn't really affect much about them other than just kind of like an aesthetic thing. Again, kind of like the wild look that a lot of people don't like that I do. Very cool, easy to take care of, pretty looking. I haven't had it for very long though, because generally speaking, just this pattern on the leaves did not appeal to me for a very long time. It was fine, but I just couldn't get into it. So I never bought one until I had the compelling reason to get a Philodendron Brazil to put into Brazil Man. And as such, I kind of gotta be a little bit conservative with my judgment on this plant, simply because I was not inspired by it very much. So, with that said, we'll go C tier for Philodendron Brazil. Maybe over time I will grow to appreciate this plant more, especially since I just recently learned about those like gnarly things the roots do, and I like that. I think it's really cool. So we will see. I suppose we can make adjustments to this as my taste changes over time. But next up is that all of them? No, there's one more. This one. This is a croton. I don't actually know what subspecies it is, or breed, strain, whatever you call it. This is a croton. It has these really pretty green and yellow and red leaves, which it develops through exposure to bright sunlight. And they like a lot of water. They're easy to tell when they need water because the leaves will droop down and it'll look as if it's pouting, which I think is really cool. And not much to say about this. They're susceptible to spider mites. They will absolutely die with not enough water. But who cares? It's pretty and it's not hard to water your plants as long as you are attentive to them. So, good plant. This is a kind of a replacement for one that I'm not particularly proud of. If we'll come down here. This was my first ever Dracaena, which I had for almost 2 years before I forgot to water it for a weekend, and it just never recovered, which was really sad because I liked this plant a lot. I saved it from pests multiple times. You can see it was a trio, so it wasn't like, dying slowly. It all went at once, which was of course disappointing, but that's part of the plant growing process. But as you can see just from leaf shape and size, they're different subspecies. They're both crotons. They both have these really bright colors. They like humidity. They like light. They like water. Very typical sort of houseplant-y vibe, I guess you could say. And I think they're pretty cool. But that's all we got in terms of houseplants today. There are a couple more that we can add to this list eventually, but I don't want to go and just start filming in my main room. Well, there could be other people doing normal daily things out there. I'll run it by them first. But for now, we'll throw the croton. I actually rated the croton when I was doing the plant reviews instead of the tier list last year. I think I gave it a 3 out of 5, which seems about right, just because they're so dramatic and will die if they're neglected for a little while. So we'll go B tier. I think that equates to about a 3 out of 5. Am I No, I for a second I thought I was calling this a Dracaena the whole time. It is, but I wasn't. It's a croton. Croton. And I also call them croutons sometimes just because it's funny, but that's not what they're called. What else we got? So that's actually the end of the plant tier list for now. This is not the final version. Feel free to submit complaints if you have an issue with any of these placements, although I don't anticipate anyone would because I'm so smart and funny and sexy. But, If you want me to explain to you why you're wrong, feel free to ask me to. But for now, water drink. Now on to the care section, and this is going to have to be done all through the plant cam because I cannot care for plants, including, watering them on my computer desk, because then it will spill and make a mess and brick my computer, I'm sure of it. So we're going to go back to our ugly little plant cam for now. I don't know if it's that ugly. It's not my favorite, but it's what we got for the time being. So, plant cam. Oh, hello? You want to cooperate, my boy? Uh-oh. I'm refreshing it. Hopefully it fixes itself. Guys, this is so embarrassing. One sec. Gotta relaunch it, it looks like. Here, in the meantime, we'll go back to where you can see me so that you're not just looking at the XSplit Vcam. Also, if you know of any better software than this for this exact purpose, feel free to let me know, because this one is kind of a pain in the butt. It works well, but it's just annoying and the UI isn't very good, and as you can see, it just drops out sometimes, which naturally is not very helpful. Tech support, please. See, here, let me show you what the problem is real quick. So we have this, and it should be streaming from my cell phone to the computer, but it isn't. So what I need to do is refresh it, but the problem is that it will not refresh. It's just stuck on this for some reason, and I don't know why that is. So what I'm going to try and do is remove chair. Oh, right, because they do this weird thing. I digress. Let's go ahead and... Oh, wait, what am I doing? It's working. I'm a fool. I'm a silly little fool. Okay, plant cam, go. Okay, very cool. So now I'm just going to go through the plants I have in here and sort out what they need. So this pothos over here, this was my first golden pothos. And this one was a little bit troublesome for a while because it was getting yellow leaves and I couldn't really tell why. And a lot of people just said, if you go too long without trimming the pothos, it'll just die back and there's not much you can do about it. And I took that at face value for a while before actually checking more carefully and realizing that I had really bad spider mites. So I gave it a really extensive wipe down when I found that out. And now what I do, I use this container, which once contained a Mite X solution. It's a fairly natural one, and now it's empty, but there's still some residual material in there, so I refill it with water, and I use this to actually humidify my plants, along with the humidifier over there. But I use this to humidify the plants because it's essentially a very, very, very deconcentrated not pesticide, but like anti-mite solution. Is that upside down? No, it's fine. Okay. It's a very dilute anti-mite solution. And you can spray the plants with that and there won't be any negative side effects. But it will be a gentle way to dissuade pests from infecting new plants, and it will hopefully keep the ones that were on this plant gone if they try and make a return. Which, let's pray it doesn't, because they're a pain in the ass to deal with. But I just go around and I use this water spray to give all the tropical plants some humidity, because this humidifier is good, but it runs out fairly quickly, and this is just kind of a supplement to that. And it also has the anti-mite qualities that I mentioned earlier. So I'm just going around hitting all these guys, generally trying to avoid the flapjack and the aloe because those are not tropical plants and we don't want a lot of humidity, especially on their leaves. And in here, because the moisture will kind of stick around because it's got the walled in, I'll actually put it on the walls instead of directly on the plant. Oh, can't find a good way. In order to allow it to evaporate and just become humid in the room rather than having it evaporate off the leaves. But yeah, this one's fairly straightforward. These guys I'm ignoring right now because I'm going to do those when I do the outdoor plants or out of room plants rather. But next up, I noticed that our basil that I showed off before needs some water. So we'll come over here. Terracotta plates are my favorite for watering plants because they'll soak up excess that drains through the drainage holes, and naturally you would prefer to have that happen. And since these plants are so brand new, their roots are probably only a couple millimeters long, if they have any at all. So I'm being very gentle to apply this water and allow it to soak in without washing the soil around too much. And I use old beer bottles to store the water because I just use filtered water for everything for the sake of simplicity. And I don't actually drink, funny enough. I take these from people who do and just recycle them over and over until they're useless. But what's next? We don't really need to do that much to most of these plants. But what I can do is show off how I check them all. So with the pothos, as I mentioned, their leaves will be nice and springy and spry when they're well watered. If you do this and then they spring back really easily, it means that they're growing well and that they are well watered, which is important because, what am I saying? It's important because they're plants and they need water. But if they're like kind of floppy and don't spring back when you do that, they are slower about it. Or if you can just see the plant overall tending to droop down a little bit, then that is what you want to do to repair that. Just give it some water. But same deal with these guys. Generally speaking, leaves will become softer and more like floppy when they need water. These monsteras are a little bit floppy right now. You can see in this leaf, it's not as robust as this one. It's like nice and flat, whereas this one's a little bit curled, which may be an indicator that this plant needs water. However, you can see across the body of the plant that the larger leaves aren't doing that. You have a couple that are, and these smaller ones definitely are, but this is either indicating that these leaves are just dying back because they're old, or it could suggest a larger problem, which I'm investigating for now. And it does look like this one has some spider mites on it, so I'll have to go through and wipe those all off with a cloth as well as some solution that kills them. It's like clove oil, garlic oil, and neem oil would also work for this, but it's not what I use. I'm trying to get a shot of the mites themselves, but it's quite hard to see. That kind of like white stuff near the stem is the eggs, and the mites may be a little bit too small to see through the camera. But looks like there are a couple on many of these leaves, but it's not too much to worry about. I'll give all of these a spray down with a more concentrated solution and then wipe down the leaves where we see the problem area. And I also wanted to go ahead and investigate some of these leaves that are yellowing off the monsteras, just to see if we can spot any problems at all. This one has some spider mites as well. I just wiped them off without showing you because I'm a silly little guy who's still learning how to stream this sort of thing. But it's a very small amount on this leaf, so it's hard to find any solid examples. There's some more egg that you can see, those little white spots there and there. But yeah, it's not super alarming because I know that spider mites are present in this whole area. And the hope is to eventually eradicate them, but it's a very difficult process. Check the philodendron. Seems pretty spry. They are a little bit floppier in general than pothos, so I need to be careful not to be too alarmist when it comes to that, because like these guys are going to respond to water needs differently than these, so I just need to be aware of that. But he was watered recently, and so was he, so I'm not too worried about them. That is another golden pothos, by the way. And this is one of my other mini monsteras. It's much larger than the other one, because I just couldn't decide between the two, so I got both. And looking at the leaves, there really isn't anything wrong with any of them right now. The plant overall looks very healthy, and I have watered it recently, so I'm not going to be doing it anymore. For the aloe, just feel it, see if it feels squishy. It does not. It's all good. The anthurium has been watered recently, and it does have a little bit of drooping in some of these lower leaves, which makes me think it might need some more water. But that is okay, because we can give it some more water. I will have to put down the camera for a second in order to give it a tray so that I don't spill water everywhere, but that's alright. You'll be okay not seeing this part of the process because it's not particularly interesting. So, put that there. Now I come down here, grab some water, and I'll just use a little bit because it doesn't seem like it's severely underwatered, and it's better to use less than more. And just gently apply the water. You know, there isn't much technique to top watering plants. Bottom watering is another thing, but we'll discuss that another day. This guy, as you can see from how like supple these leaves are and how much they're kind of perking up, was actually recently watered. I watered it last night, so that one's all good. And that actually does it for this set of plants. This guy and this guy are both very small, and this one has low requirements because it's small. This one has low requirements because it's a snake plant. So we don't need to really worry about them as frequently as we do these larger guys. And this one I took care of earlier today because I noticed that it was sunburned, so I brought it inside. So that one does not need anything either. But that about does it for all these plants. The orchid was taken care of yesterday as well. I just ran some water through it and allowed it all to drain out of this bottom pot. And this is not a permanent location for this, but this is where it is due to the stream. There's actually drainage at the bottom. I just ran some filtered water through it and then replaced it in its pot. Sprayed it with a little bit of humidity and then put it back in its spot over there, which is in between that mini and that golden pothos. But I'm putting it here right now because I don't want to drop it as I try and put it in with no camera, or with one hand rather. These guys do not need anything. They are cactuses. So, yeah, that's about it. Like I said, I'm not doing these right now because I'm going to move them back to where they need to go anyway. And I do not want to water them while they're on my bed. So, that actually went quicker than I expected, the portion of the video where we went through and took care of all the plants. I'll be sure to stream again another time when I have more significant things to do, such as repotting and like fertilizing and pest control and stuff like that. And once I have a better grasp on what I can do to make that process more interesting, because obviously waving around the shaky cam is not the most preferable solution to that. So I'm going to be working on that to improve it and make it more interesting for you folks at home. But yeah, for now, I think that about covers it. I did mention that we were going to do a Q&A, and I don't think we have enough people to just, you know, stick around and just wait for questions to roll in. But I will say, like right now, if you have any pressing issues that you want to, you know about, I'm happy to answer any questions that you've got. Plants, sustainability, anything like that. If you just want to know about trivia or care, anything like that, feel free to ask. But if not, we'll probably get going here in a little bit, simply because I have not eaten dinner and because my voice is going and I'm out of water despite having ice. Am I? Ah, wonderful. There's a little bit more. But yeah, that about does it for today. thank you all for tuning in, to those of you who did. I really appreciate the support. I know this is not the quality gaming content that you may have signed up for, but frankly, this is one of the more fun parts about streaming to me, is just, you know, sharing my knowledge of plants and stuff. So I'm going to be doing this more, even if it's not particularly well received by my current audience, or any audience for that matter. It's fun, it's something that I enjoy, and that doesn't mean the gaming's going to go away, or anything else that we've done in the past on streams. I'm just going to be adding this in as well, because I enjoy it, and that's it. I like it. Deal with it. But anyway, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for learning about plants. Be sure to support local sustainable initiatives and live your life in a way that you can be proud of. Anyway, bye-bye.